Welcome to the System Simplified podcast, where we feature top leaders who share stories on how to successfully systemize a business. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hello, AT Klevit here, the host of the System Simplified podcast, where I interview top founders, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders about systematizing a business. And this episode is being brought to you by Business Success Consulting Group, where we create, document, and implement processes and procedures so businesses can grow and thrive. And today's guest is Jason Swenk. Hi, Jason.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for being here. So before we even get into the introduction, and I'm very excited to have you, by the way, because, and I'm going to introduce you and our listeners will see why, but you are definitely fit that category of like an entrepreneur that grew, you scaled and you grew two businesses, not one, and now you're helping others do the same, which is absolutely incredible. And you have a new book, and we'll talk about that. But we have to give a shout out to Dr. Jeremy Wise that introduced us. Jeremy and John from Rise 25 produced this podcast. They are dear friends. And if you're not connected to Jeremy, if you don't know Jeremy, definitely go on LinkedIn, Jeremy Wise, and see what it's all about. But thank you, Jeremy, for introducing us. Absolutely. Okay, good. So here's the bio, and then I would like you to add to it. So you basically grew two agencies from nothing to basically an 8-figure agencies. And you are one of the most sought out advisors to agency in the world by showing them an 8-system framework that worked for growing your agency, working with brands like AT&T, Hitachi, Lotus Cars, and eventually got you to sell the agencies, both of them, right?
Just one. I still have the other one.
Still have the other one, but it's still growing and doing great. So, it's definitely the dream, right? The dream of every entrepreneur to grow the business, expand it, scale, and then be able to sell and exit. So let's start with your entrepreneurial journey. How did it start?
I mean, I guess it started probably when I was a real little kid. I mean, I grew up in Florida, like we were talking on the pre-show, and I lived by a golf course. And I remember selling golf balls back to the golfers, going into the ponds and, putting them in egg cartons and cleaning them up and, charging $1 to $5 a ball. And I was like, wow, this is cool, making money and figuring out, hey, this is something wants. And then I even figured out, I was like, let's stand by the later holes because all the golfers lose their balls before these holes and they'll need more balls. So, it was always kind of strategizing, even back then.
Amazing. That's actually a common thing that I hear. I mean, for me too, I started at a very young age, I started working, and like entrepreneurs have that. I mean, always looking for ways to basically be successful, strategize, figure out how they can make their way, right? So,
Yep.
Okay, so that was when you were a kid, and then how did it develop to actually starting your agencies?
Well, I actually owe everything to Justin Timberlake, even though I don't know Justin. One of my friends looked like him when he was in the band NSYNC. And so in 98, I think it was the 98, I created a fake band, fake website called In Shit. And it got really popular. And then people started asking me to design websites for them. And so that's kind of how I got started. I was an accidental kind of agency owner. And then even with this business, I was kind of accidental into, coaching agency owners. So it's always but I've always been listening or watching for signs of going, oh, hey, this is the next path.
Interesting. Okay. So share with us the journey of growing it from nothing, because you basically started, it's not like you had investors or anything, right? I mean, you probably had the first few clients and got going. How long did it take you to build it up to an 8-figure business?
Probably 11 years. So it was a long time for the first go round. Now for the second go round, we were up above that mark in a year and a half, and we can kind of go through that. So it's amazing what you learn later on, going through. But one of the major things, I think it took us maybe 3 years to get over the 1 million mark the first time. And it was kind of like, I feel businesses can hit over the 1 million mark by accident. And then you have to kind of have the right systems in place in order to really kind of figure out, how do I kind of scale this thing, right? Because you'll have the ups and downs, and then really kind of everything's depending on the owner. And when we got to the million, everything was dependent on me, from sales or delivery. Like I would concentrate on sales, and then delivery would go down. Then I'd concentrate on delivery, and then the sales would go down. And it was constantly like this roller coaster line, and I was completely miserable. And got to a point where I even, we were a couple million at the time. And I remember my wife saying, well, why don't you just go quit? Why don't you quit the agency, shut it down, and go take a job? So I started taking interviews, and I actually interviewed with NASCAR, and they asked me 2 questions, and they said, what do you want to do every day? What do you love doing? And what do you never want to do ever again? And I couldn't answer it in the interview. It was probably the worst interview because I was probably so upset, right? And I went home that night and I was like, well, it's easier to think about all the things I don't want to do anymore. So let me just write that down. And so the exercise I always tell everybody to do, and everyone watching or listening can do this. If you get like a sheet of paper, 8.5 by 11, put your fist on the sheet of paper and draw a circle around it. And then spend maybe a half hour, 45 minutes, really kind of writing outside the circle of everything you never want to do again. Could be client management, could be sales, project, whatever it is. Concentrate on that. And then after about 45 minutes, then concentrate everything you love doing and put that inside the circle. And that will actually give you a lot of clarity. And when I started doing this, I was like, oh, wow, I can say no to this. These are the types of clients I don't want. These are the types of clients I want. These are the people I need to hire. These are the people I need to fire. And it just gave me clarity. And then that's when, the agency started having steady growth.
Wow. That's incredible. So it's the purpose. It's like what motivates you and what you're good at. That's great. Okay. And then what? I mean, we have 8 steps. So tell me about the 8 steps.
Yeah. So the first one I just described is kind of clarity, getting clarity of where you're going, right? And really having that vision and communicating it to the team. Because if you don't communicate it to the team, they're going to make decisions based on what's best for them rather than what's best for the agency. And 2, a lot of times as you're scaling a company, all your team members keep coming to the owner or the entrepreneur. And like, you're probably like, well, why is that? Well, if you just gave them a direction of where you're going, or you actually put it back on them to make a decision, then they'll stop coming to you, and then you can have a chance to scale. Right. The second one is positioning. You need to have a system for how can you position your business where it doesn't look like everyone else. How can you ask the right question? It's not about like, I work with agency owners. And so agency owners are always famous for going, hey, check out my people, my portfolio, and my process. Well, those 3 things are actually incorrect because it's all focused on you, not the prospect. But if you can focus on the prospect, like if you go to jasonswenk.com/about, you won't see anything about me until maybe halfway down the page, right? Because I want to ask the right questions. Hey, do you struggle with lead gen? Do you struggle with finding the right talent or who to hire next? Do you struggle with figuring out what your agency's worth or whatever it is? Right? I ask those questions going, hey, I might be able to help you, right? So it's about positioning in the right way. The third system is around your offering. And now I've only had service-based businesses, so that's my bag. I don't know anything about consumer products other than designing websites for them many, many years ago. So my knowledge is all for B2B. So when you think about your offering, a lot of times companies actually pitch marriage right off the bat. And I think it's a mistake. It's creating a more risky decision, a harder decision, right? Because it's a big commitment. It's kind of like if I went up to my wife, how long have we been married? 19 years? Yeah, 18 years. If I went up to her maybe 25 years ago when I met her and I said, hey, will you marry me on the first date? She's going to run away. The same thing has to go with all your services. So you want to think about how can I slice off part of my offering in order to make it an easier decision to build trust, to show value, because the easiest way to build trust is show value. If you can make it a stupid, easy decision, then they're going to, move on with you. You have any questions so far on the first?
Yeah. How do you apply that to your agency? Like, the slicing, like, let's say if you have an agency, because, I can see it like, let's say, when you offer like maybe like as a consultant, you can offer like a free online course, so you can do like a little of a free session or something like that. What do you do for your agency?
Yeah, so offering something for free is usually not the best thing to do because people are like, well, it's free, it's not worth much.
Right.
So what I always like to do is we always have a qualifying call first. I call it kind of our clarity call, figuring out where are they going, where are they at now, what's the biggest problem, and see if we can bridge it together. And then from that call, then we'll position what we call our agency blueprint. This is something we charge for. It's a very small fee. And we even tell them, we're like, look, we don't make money on this. I just do it to see if you're actually serious and to keep the time wasters at bay. And I also tell them, I go, there's 3 possible outcomes. You'll love the plan. You'll go do it yourself. I'll wish you luck. Number 2, which is the most common, you'll love the plan. You want our help and we can talk about it. Number 3, you don't like the plan. I give your money back. So there's nothing for you to lose. And then on this agency blueprint, we're actually building it with them. And that's the key. People will go, oh, let me give you this audit. And then they come back and they present this, generic report that some AI tool actually generated, right? And it's kind of not worth anything. But if you can build a plan with the prospect on, they're going to believe it because you made them think that they built it. But they've also got to know you, like, and trust you, which now they're 20 times more likely going to, work with you after that. So
That's
it's all
genius.
about
Just
kind
genius.
of,
yeah.
And then the next thing is like you build a project. And then once you build the project, you show them value, then you go into a retainer. I've had many clients, they would start off with $5,000 a month retainers, basically hold on their clients for 6 months. That's a whole nother story. So basically every client they sign makes $30,000. But by doing this foot in the door to an offering ladder, they were able to raise the retainers to over $9,000 for a 12-month engagement. They were able to sell a $15,000 project in the middle and charge like a $2,500 foot in the door. So now every client they sign, they're making well over $100K just by changing the right offering.
So the offering is like, you first of all do the blueprint.
Yep. You do a triage call or a clarity call. Think about like a hospital, right? You come in with your arm missing. They go, yep, your arm's missing. You go in this room, right? And then you have the strategy and you're building a plan with the doctor of like, how do we reattach your arm? And then they reattach your arm. And then they talk about the reoccurring after that, which is maybe like the therapy. What is it?
Yeah, like a physical therapy or
physical therapy. That's the word that was eluding me.
So like in an agency, you do the initial discovery call. Okay. And then you figure out, okay, well, you know what, we need to, I don't know, let's say redesign your website because, it's totally, we need to redesign that. Right. So then you do a strategy call or a strategy blueprint, several calls. It depends on how long it takes. And you actually build that concept. And then you create a project, which will be the website, right? Will be like actually create the website. And then you go into a retainer in terms of like, okay, what else can we help you with in terms of marketing? Would that be
and it all goes back to system 2 about positioning. Like, how are you positioning yourself as the trusted advisor, not just the order taker? So like if a client's coming to you, like many years ago, Lotus Cars came to us to design this new website. And so everyone was, pitching them a new website. And I told them, I said, let's step back. Let's meet for a day and let's build out a strategy for you. That was our foot in the door. And then that led to building a landing page for a project, which then that led to becoming the agency of record and having a big retainer. So it's all about staggering it, being patient, and showing value for that client.
I love it. Good. So that's step number 3. I love it. What's step number 4?
Step number 4 is prospecting. Most times businesses, they rely on word of mouth or referrals, which is just not scalable if you get into that. And usually you'll get the same type of business that you already have. And in order to scale, you have to constantly get new, bigger clients and that can pay you more and more. So referrals is nice to have in the beginning, and it's always nice to have, but you just can't rely on it. So I always look at it in kind of like a 3-legged stool. You want to create an inbound channel, which is, creating content like this, creating a podcast. where you can use other people's knowledge and build content, or you can do a video or write a blog or whatever it is. Like, create content that helps a particular audience, but also has a call to action in order to, kind of have them say, hey, yeah, I think you could help. I like working with you. Number two is an outbound strategy. So like, you should be actively reaching out to your perfect audience. Like, if you don't have a top 100 hit list, not to kill, but to like win them over as a client, like doing research, sending them gifts, inviting them on your podcast, whatever it is, to build that relationship, let them know that you actually exist. And then you can kind of follow up with a number of different things. And then number three, figure out what are the strategic partners that can help you. One of the big things that helped us scale quickly after we started doing this was building strategic partnerships with technologies that our clients were going after. So we became one of the best partners in the world for Microsoft back in the day. Same thing with a lot of other content management systems, where we weren't just a referral partner. We showed them going, hey, look what we did for this client using your platform and your technology. And then they would highlight that to the company. And then the company would be like, oh man, send them more work. So then, we had all these channels that were constantly working. So if one or two went down, cool. We still had some, pipeline. We were still building our pipeline, because cash flow and pipeline are the biggest things. If you don't have either of those, you're kind of dead in the water.
Absolutely. So I have a question on the strategic partners. So what do you consider, or who do you consider, not necessarily names, but how do you build that strategic partnership?
Well, you first you identify them, right? And then once you identify them, you reach out and you do what you want them to do for you first. Like, if you reached out to me and like, Jason, you have all these agency owners, can you send them this way? I'd be like, no, I don't know you from anything. But if you're, like, for example, I remember this one person back when LinkedIn outreach was really cool. Now it's kind of really slimy and scummy, right? Like, I just can't stand it. But I remember he was like, hey, there's this really cool strategy I'd love to try for you. Didn't ask me for anything. I was like, yeah, sure, go for it. And it worked. And then I was like, wow, that's amazing. Then I started sending him tons and tons of business. So that's how you build a strategic partnership.
Absolutely. Good. And then you obviously nurture that relationship, it goes back and forth.
Yep.
All right. Step number 5.
5 is sales, right? You have to have a sales system. So if you're the owner doing all the sales, you got to think too, how marketable are you to like having an exit one day, right? If you're doing all the sales, or you doing all these different things. So you have to think about, what is my sales system? How do I qualify? How do I, run a sales call? How do I run a triage call? How do I do the clarity call, the blueprint call? Like, have everything documented and have a process around it, so you can make sure you're saving time. When you could do that, like, for example, when I would bring on salespeople, I would say, all right, if you remember NBAT, what's the need, budget, authority, and timing? So like, when you're talking to a prospect, I can qualify anybody in about 5 minutes and figure out their budget. Are they the authority? What's their timing? What do they need? And so like, I would just give them a framework to follow in order to do that. So that's there's a lot more that goes into the sales system. We're just obviously talking very, very high level.
Good. So that's sales. Next one.
Next one is delivery, right? So there's lots of companies out there that are really good at marketing and sales, but they suck at delivery and they can't deliver results. And so you got to think about, what's my system for onboarding clients? Like, when you sign up a client, yeah, you as the agency or business owner, you're ringing the bell, high-fiving each other internally, but the clients are automatically thinking, did I make the right decision? And having buyer's remorse. So what is that system for making sure that they're still excited? What's the system to make sure you're avoiding most profit leaks, right? So when I talk about profit leaks, it could be you're not charging the right amount. You could be over delivering and really costing you, or scope creep could be in there, where the client keeps asking for more and more. They're not doing it on purpose, but you have no system in place to say, no, client, that's actually additional. And I'll give you guys a helpful hint. if you are running into scope creep and your clients are constantly asking for things that are not on the menu or that weren't agreed to in the proposal, do a $0 change order for the small things. So what you're doing is you're training them. So when someone comes to you for a 15-minute fix, most companies will say, all right, it's 15 minutes, I'll do it. But they never tell the clients out of scope. But if you say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Client, it's actually out of scope and you minimum 1 hour, that's what we would do, saying, we're going to $0 out the change order. We just need you to physically sign this and send it back. So then when they come to you for the big item, now you're like, okay, well, this is additional. I already gave you 3 things. And they're like, okay, cool. Yeah, go ahead and do it.
That's very true. Absolutely. I learned that as well. I mean, it really works because then you actually force the issue of like, this is still delivery, but, we conscientiously decided to give you that discount or that free thing. Absolutely.
Yep.
Good. So that's delivery, and delivery has to be high quality because that really works. Absolutely.
Yeah. And then the last 2 systems really quick are really kind of operations and leadership. So if you think about, if you want to get to a point to really scale your business or your agency, there's really kind of 5 roles you need to fall into, and everything else you need to say no to. So the first one, and this goes back to the clarity, right? System 1, communicating your vision to the team often and making sure that they understand that, and you're giving them whatever they need in order to make the right decision rather than coming to you. Number 2 is be the face of the organization. And most people actually don't agree with this. And they go, well, if I'm the face, then everyone's going to want to come to me. Exactly. That's what you want. But they're like, but then I have to do the work. I'm like, no, you don't. Like Gary Vaynerchuk's a great example of this, right? He creates so much content, and I can promise you, he doesn't do project management. He doesn't do account management. He doesn't do strategy for his clients. He just put the right team in place that believe in what he believes in. Number 3 is coach and mentor your leadership team, not the whole team, and then show them how they can do it for the managers, the directors, and so on and so on. And so now you should only have like 4 or 5 direct reports. Any more than that, you're shooting yourself in the foot, and you're going to walk with a limp. And then the other one is understand the financials and build key relationships. And then when you're able to achieve these 5 roles, you've transformed from an owner to a CEO. And then you're going to be completely and utterly depressed because you're going to walk into meetings and they're not going to need you. And then you walk into another meeting, they're not going to need you. And then you just got to remember what I told you on this podcast is they don't need you for what you used to do. They need you for the new stuff. And then when you realize that, then you can actually transform. And then the business is kind of, it's not held back. You're not holding the reins back.
Very true. And then you can create your new vision, your new game, where you're going next. Absolutely.
Exactly.
Jason, this is amazing. Such great information. So what's the name of your book if people want to buy it and read it? Well, they should actually, because, I honestly think, you wrote it for agencies, but it applies to any business.
It does. Yeah. Yeah. It's called Creating the Perfect Digital Agency Avalanche of Leads. If you go to jasonswenk.com/avalanche, it links over to Amazon. You can search my name. I have 2 books out there. One on the 8 systems that we just went over, and then another one. And the new one is actually kind of a micro book. I always hate like the long, drawn out books. Like even my videos, I like to get to the point. I'm like, here's what you need to know. Here's what you need to go do. So if you just go to jasonswenk.com/avalanche, it will go over to Amazon, and you'll be able to, we have an audiobook that I recorded, and Kindle, and all the things. So
that's incredible. Absolutely incredible. And I definitely encourage our listeners to go to your website and then from there to Amazon and get the book and hear more about what you have to say. Because obviously, you just don't just talk, you actually walk the walk, you've done it. So one more question is, like, you sold the one agency and then you started another one. Why did you decide to start another one?
Well, I started with a number of other really smart people. And I never had a plan to start another agency. I just remember them coming to me a couple of years ago with this idea. They're like, we want to see if we can kind of grow the business through acquisition. And we started with $1 million agency. So Thomas's agency was $1 million. And we're like, okay, cool. Well, let's work out a strategy where we can actually buy agencies. And this is not the BS roll-up strategy where we're like, just come and join us. And then revenue, like we were only buying agencies that are over $1 million in EBITDA. And so we would say, if you're $1 million in EBITDA, we'll value your agency at $5 million. We'll give you half in cash and another half in equity. And we've done that 10 times now. And so we've just kept growing and growing and growing. And it's been going really, really good. So, and that agency is called Republics.
Okay, good. Definitely check it out. That's great. That is such a great success story. And you have a system there, which I love. So thank you so much for sharing it with us, with me, with the listeners. Very, very, a lot of information in this podcast. So thank you so much. I'm also going to write a blog based on it so people can read it and follow, and definitely check out your book and buy the book and read it. So thank you again for being a guest on this podcast.
Yep. Perfect. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the System Simplified podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.